Thank you. I'm still audible.
Yes, you are, Shell.
Okay, so our agenda for today, I'm going to introduce a speaker in like 2 seconds. Then at the end of the talk, we are going to have the Q&A and later on the closing remarks. So who is our speaker today? Oscar is a data specialist, helps achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and is currently working in the international development sector, directing the development of a full data and analytics pipeline. Previous roles have seen him modeling energy consumption of buildings, auditing energy use and carbon emission metrics, and closely following macro and microeconomic trends in plastic recycling value chains. His 15-year career has seen him on both sides of the hiring table many times and has valuable. Later forward them the link to the book. We are going to post it in the chat. The main aim of this presentation will be to demystify the hiring process and give concrete examples of how to improve one's chances. Oscar will explain why it is that applying to hundreds of jobs can still result in getting no interviews or even responses. Basically, he'll help to alleviate the sense of failure from participants. He'll then go into the single biggest improvement he thinks people can make, and that's to their CV and cover letter. He's seen so many poor ones that can basically be improved in the same way. He'll also touch on a strategy he uses when job hunting to conserve his energy and emotional state. Over to you, Oscar.
Great, thanks for that introduction, Shal, and thanks very much as well to Maggie and Joki for inviting me. I really look forward to this, this opportunity to present to all of you. So let's go ahead and share my screen. So I will also mention that I think it's pretty fantastic seeing the range of participants we have today from all over. And so I'm in a quite fortunate position. I've seen CVs from people in all of these countries. And so I think this will be something useful and valuable for everyone here today. Hopefully, anyway, that's my goal. All right, so yeah, I'll just get started. As you've heard now, the title is Job Hunting for Data Analysts. And why is it tough and what you can do about it. All right, so you've heard a little bit about me, but I thought I'll add a little bit more. So I've been hiring, you know, I've had a few jobs myself, but also had to hire quite a few people. And particularly over the last, let's say, year or so, a little bit more, I was looking at a lot of CVs of people, right? A lot of job applications. And I just kept on seeing the same recurring, what I felt was the same recurring problem over and over, that, you know, if I could get back to every single applicant and just tell them why it was that their application didn't go any further, I would. But of course, that's just not feasible. So hopefully this can go some way to helping. If it helps at all, I mean, I've twice now, and let's say in 6 jobs, I've twice received feedback that my application was really exceptional. And I think that those principles are the same ones that I kind of think are fairly simple principles to apply, but can really help you quite a long way. As mentioned, I also maintain Big Book of R. I created it some time ago. Definitely go check it out. It's my pride and joy. I'd say it's one of my favorite things I've ever made. Still gets quite a lot of excitement when people find it for the first time. I wrote a short book called Project Management Fundamental for Data Analysts, which really takes the very basic fundamental principles as I see them and gives some examples of how these apply in data projects. And the main aim there is really just that you can stop feeling like every project you work on keeps catching fire and is completely delayed all the time. I tweet quite a lot at Oscar Baruffa. I'd say that's probably one of the best ways to, if you want to get in touch with me and chat. I'm always on Twitter. I blog quite, not very regularly, but I say once or twice a month over at oscarbaruffa.com. And I also have a newsletter that is probably the best way to keep track of all things that I think are important for people who are interested at all in sort of the same things I'm interested in, data, careers, and R. Then you can go there. I'm also have a link to these slides at the end of the presentation, so you don't have to worry about taking down all notes, and especially links to things and all that. That's all available. And of course, I just wanted to, maybe you'll see it here. I thought this would be in the shot, but I'm a huge, huge, huge fan of R. So I got this Tidyverse shirt. I hope it shows the right way. When it's summertime here, I'm living in the Netherlands, by the way, and when it's summertime here in a couple of months, I'm going to be wearing this and hopefully make some more real life R buddies, let's say. All right, so with that said, let's go ahead. All right, so there's some caveats that apply, like with most things in life, right? But in this case, I would say this advice isn't research driven, right? It's not like I've got and data driven. I've not analyzed CVs and seen which ones got through over thousands of cases. This is really based on my experience over some time. There are obviously local job and a local job market and cultural factors which may mean you need to adjust your approach for those, right? And I can't tell what they will always be. Although I must say, now it's starting to feel more and more like, at least in the markets I've seen, the job process seems to be kind of similar. Yeah, so there's that. Of course, you've got your own preferred approach. There's things that you just feel more comfortable doing or saying or not, but hopefully as well, what I'm going to show you is actually going to help you feel a lot more comfortable about job hunting in general. You may, of course, find contradictory advice, right? Like many people have different experiences, and some may have much better advice than me in some situations. So the idea really is that I hope you just cherry pick the things that you think, wow, that's actually a really good tip or something I'm going to try, and then try it for yourself. All righty. You may have questions as we go. And then what I've done is throughout the presentation, I've also highlighted what I think people will be asking. I'll present all those questions at the end again, then participants can, you can have a look and see if you want to ask me one of those. And I just ask that you also keep all your questions for the end of the presentation, just so I can make sure I get to it in good time. Also, quite a lot of the questions I think I've anticipated. So yeah, I think I should be able to answer quite a lot of them. All right, so with that said, we'll start with the job hunting process. All right, so when you're job hunting, right, is Tom, just see if any of this resonates with you. So you think, I was perfect for that job. Why did I not even get a rejection, right? According to you, you ticked every single box that there was. So why didn't you didn't get a rejection letter? You feel pretty exhausted, right? And sometimes at some point you might start having some self-confidence issues, or you feel a bit sad about the whole, let's say, lack of results. Sometimes you think, wow, how many jobs must I apply to, right? I applied to 10, 20, 30. I see some people apply to 100 or more jobs, still not hearing back. Often you think, wow, these requirements are just crazy. Like, I just can't, how do this isn't a person they're hiring, they're trying to hire a whole data science team. Sometimes, yeah, this also then comes with, do I actually know anything, right? You can start thinking, well, actually, I don't know anything, which I can guarantee you is not the case, but these thoughts can crop up, especially if you're not getting any results. yeah, and then sometimes you think, wow, I just actually don't have any skills. Like I'm unskilled. I need to retrain completely. I need to pick a different path. And probably the worst of all is if you start thinking, wow, I'm unemployable. Like, you know, this is, I'm really questioning my self-worth and all that. These are really terrible things to go through. And I'm sure you've felt these. And I can tell you, I have felt all of these things. And that's why I sort of feel it on such a visceral level, right? When I can sense other people are having a really tough time. And that's even with all my experience, right? And all the evidence that points to I'm employable and I can do a job at least, you know, to the minimum satisfaction to that's needed. And guaranteed, some of these thoughts will still pass through my mind the next time I'm looking for work. That's just the nature of it. But that's a lot of like how you feel, right? Let's try and separate how you feel from some of the facts. So the facts, as I see them, are that companies need work done and they need people to do that work. The other side of it is that you are employable. You do have skills and knowledge that companies need, right? There's although many of the, let's say, problems and ambitions and goals and work that companies want to do, the basic level of work and skills needed is actually much lower than that, right? So I think we've all worked into positions where you see the ambition is really, really high, but the actual daily task requirements are much more manageable, let's say, or the bar to do them well is not actually that high. It's just you need to have a lot of soft skills that aren't very, let's say, attractive to add in a job ad, let's say. But in any case, let me not go too far from another path there. All right. So another question might be here that I'll be glad to answer later as well. How do you actually identify what skills and knowledge you have? We can park that for a bit later. But anyway, these are the facts. So what does a typical, as I call it, the job ad to first day pipeline look like from a company's perspective, right? So a hiring manager. So the first is you need to scope the job profile. That's basically trying to get one or multiple parties to agree what is it that this person is going to be doing. Sometimes that is a very easy process, and sometimes that can take very long to get to an answer. Then once you have it, you've got to create a job ad and publish it. Then you screen a whole lot of CVs and cover letters to create a shortlist. From that shortlist, you've got your one or multiple interview rounds, and then sometimes also there's some kind of technical assignment. Then there's a process of getting an offer and actually starting the role. And lots of things can happen in all of these stages. But what's a really key one for this talk is I'm going to be focusing on, from the hiring process, screening CVs or resumes, depends where you're, if you may be based more in the US, I believe they say resume more often. The CVs, resumes, cover letters, this is the screening process, is super, super key. And I think this is where probably is the lowest amount of effort that you can do to vastly improve your prospects. So let's talk about some of the problems that are out there, right? The problem is definitely not just with your CV, right, or your skill sets or whatever. From the company side, many job scopes are actually written very poorly. I've seen many poor ones, right? And I've probably even created one or two ones that aren't that great. Job scope is poorly defined. The company doesn't really know actually what they want. Oftentimes, the job ad is too generic. There's many ads I've seen where if you just scratch the name of one company out and put another, you actually wouldn't tell that you've switched company names because they're just so generic. But I mean, we know that the work required in a specific role can't just be so copy and paste that they can be so similar. And also, I think that many jobs just have way too many requirements. Many of us have seen that. They just ask for too many things, right? And when a job has so many requirements, that's no one person can match. It makes it very difficult as the job applicant to know what does the role really need, and how can I highlight that I match what the job needs, right? If everything is a priority, then nothing's really a priority, as they say. However, on the applicant side, on your side, mostly the problem is that the CV you put in is way too generic, and the cover letter as well. It's the same problem. Like almost you could just change it almost seems like, I mean, many applicants, it really feels like they did not read the job description at all. So with all these problems, you can only really, you can't do anything about what's happening on the company side, right? But what you can do is improve your CV and cover letter. And that's what I'll be giving you some examples of how you do that. So a little bit more of the hiring process. These are like typically all the people that could be involved, right? So if it's a very large company, maybe they've got some automated applicant tracking system in the input, right? That screens a lot of applications in the beginning. You've got a recruiter that's involved. Usually that can either be someone internal to the company or external. There's then the hiring manager, right? So this is often like when I say the hiring manager, it's not the title of, that's not someone's role, like, or title in the company. That just happens to be their role in this process. So they are responsible for finding someone to fill the role. And there'll generally be a colleague, sometimes multiple, that help the hiring manager, as a sounding board to get second opinion, to take part in the interviews and so on. And then above that, you've kind of got the boss of these people, right? You've got sometimes some sort of technical lead. You've got a director who's overall responsible, often has a say as well in in one of the final interviews. And then you've got the HR manager as well, who kind of is responsible that the whole hiring process is fair and equitable and as objective as possible. But now this is, of course, is an idealized view that everyone's all smiling and happy whenever your application lands on their desk, right? So first, you've got the applicant tracking system. Many are, in my view, quite terrible, right? It's just a pain to work with. And like, I mean, if you know data, any automated system that's trying to screen things is going to be probably prone to lots of error. The recruiter maybe that day is just feeling quite sad for whatever reason, right? And is not in the mood to really dig through your CV to try and figure out if you are a match. Maybe they're just tired. The hiring manager might be distracted by any number of things, right? Remember as well, the hiring manager is doing the hiring on top of all of their normal work. And I don't know anyone who gets a percentage of their work time allocated just to hiring. Maybe if you're in a startup or something, they'll say, okay, spend 10% of your time just hiring, but most people it's over and above their role. Maybe the colleague that's helping has had a really tough day as well. The tech lead perhaps perpetually overworked. The director, this is sometimes even good things happening, maybe they had a great sandwich for lunch and the next applicant they happen to see has the surname Sandwich and they think, wow, this is a fantastic hire. It can happen. HR managers are usually quite cool and calm-headed in my experience anyway. So usually they're kind of keeping everyone in line. Now, it's not to say this is always all the case, but just again that there's so many factors outside of your control that you need to assume that your CV could be landing on the desk of someone who's not fully engaged. Now that shouldn't be the case, but that is the reality, right? And then you need to really make it stand out and easy for them to see, okay, yeah, this is a really, there's a match here, right? And in this process is also how applications go from tens, even hundreds of applications down to a few to the shortlist. And I think what many people, this has been my experience, many people don't realize is your CV is actually not competing against 100 CVs, right? It can feel quite despondent, like, oh, I'm going to apply to this job and there's like hundreds of CVs. It's just such a stroke of luck whether you get in or not. Actually, out of these 100, maybe 6 are what I would consider good. Good in the sense that it's easy to see how there's a match to this job. I think, especially if there's a role that you are applying to where you're a good match, most likely you are only really competing with 6 other good matches, 5 or 6. That's been the sort of ratio I've seen so far. I can tell you on the hiring side of the table, whenever I've seen a match, it really, I sit up in my chair. I mean, you're looking through lots of CVs and they stand out. It's clear as day. All right, so let's take a quick breath here. So your CV, and I'll say CV / cover letter, let's use them a little bit interchangeably because they go together as a package often. So who you are versus what this hiring team can say, right? So it's these, maybe I'll skip that. So it's these people in this process that are the ones doing the screening of CVs. Everyone else further along is only seeing the shortlist. So these might be all things about you, right? You tell good jokes, you're nice to work with, you're really good at Googling errors, you don't mind too much when you see, some code errors pop out. They don't freak you out. You just kind of deal with it and move on. You're persistent and you finish projects. Like, these are fantastic qualities in any colleague. But what do we see when we look at all of this? We can only see what your CV says, right? There's nothing else for us to go on. Really, that's it. I mean, we can't see any of this. And the job of your CV is to pick out what is relevant here and put that in the role. Not all of these things are going to be relevant, right? And of course, you're not going to say it in this way, but these are the messages that if they're relevant for that role, you might want to tell. And I see your CV has a job, like just like, I mean, when you're in a role, you have a job, your CV has a job, but your CV can only do that job as well as you set it up to do. Your CV's job is to make that mental leap for the hiring manager as short as possible, right? And this hiring manager is looking at many, many CVs. They can only expend so much energy themselves looking at that to try and uncover, is this a good candidate or not? And if there's 10 CVs that it's really hard, I mean, let's say out of 10 CVs, right? Maybe all are good matches. But if only one of them actually, the CV is saying, hey, I am a good match because you said X, Y, Z, and I can show you X, Y, Z. That's the CV that jumps out as, oh, okay, this is someone that we can keep working with. On the other side, like if there were 9 other CVs that don't show any sort of promise, then do I really have to go and interview 9 people who, on the face of it, don't seem to be a match at all? It's just not very good use of our time. Obviously, like this, and this is maybe the 10th, 20th, 50th CV. How am I going to just spell out that I'm a match for this role? And when I say a match, I don't mean 100% match, right? You're just trying to surface what is it that you have that is a match, because you don't know, especially when let's say when job ads have a lot of requirements. There's actually only a few of those that are really key, and applicants don't match all the points. And you're also, let's say the job ad in that sense, or the requirements do change depending on also who's available, right? So if you, I can use a recent example. Like if we're looking for someone with a particular, let's say, SQL skills, right? We said, okay, well, that would be quite handy if they had SQL skills. We had so many applications, none of them had very strong SQL skills. So we said, okay, well, on that basis, maybe then we'll hire in a contractor to help, or we can provide extra training. It doesn't really matter, right? But if someone had applied that would have still matched these other non-SQL skills, but then they remove themselves from the process, then we would never perhaps find that match, right? So yeah, so what you're trying to do is just make it as good as possible. And yeah, sometimes it does feel like I'm being punished, right? When some CVs I just look like, wow, you're really going to make this very hard for me to try and find whether you are suited to this role at all. So please don't punish a hiring manager. All right. So how do you practically implement making your CV better? So there's 3, I think of it, there's 3 kind of CVs that you need to have. CVs and / cover letters, right? You've got your generic one. You've got like a semi-tailored CV or multiple, depending on the situation. And then you've got these highly tailored CVs. So what does this mean? So the generic CV is one CV that you use for, that you could potentially use for any role that you put in, right? This is, now if you're wondering what's that like, that's almost everyone here is currently using a generic CV. If you're not altering it really in any way for each job, that's what you're using it. And just by the way, I found while I was doing research for this, while I was putting this presentation together, I found this really great site. That's just, I mean, what you're looking at now is a pretty good example of a CV, right? And I've seen ones that use this exact template. That's fine, you know. It's got some good layouts and information, but worry less about how it looks. It's more about what content is in there compared to the job you're hiring for. Now, generic CVs are in themselves not bad. They have their place and they're very useful. But as you'll see, I think the problem is when a generic CV is used where a very specific CV would have done much better. That's where the problem comes in. So there's pros and cons to this, right? So this is not, you can just reuse the same CV over and over. It saves you a lot of time. But from the hiring, or let's say the cons on your side is, it will be very hard for you to show how it is that you match a role specifically. So for example, let's say there's this Farah Martin, and she's got all this great role, right? But let's say there's you see how short a CV needs to be, right? You really want to just get the key points across. These days, 1 or 2 pages really maximum is what's expected. And there might be a role where this generic CV is fine, right? It tells the hiring manager everything we need to know. But there may be other experience that Farah has that's she's not listing here because it's very unique to a certain type of role, or it may be due to very specific experience that she had that is in general not very transferable to many roles. But now let's say there comes a role which she thinks, wow, I've got this fantastic experience in XYZ job that would be really cool, but I'll send this CV in that doesn't highlight any of that specific experience in the hope that this gets her to the interview round. This is where she's likely then to not even get the response, right? Because there's so little match to the job ad that never happens. And the hiring manager that can't see past the CV. This is all they have to work with. So that's why there's using a generic CV where you do have the skills and should rather, however it is, match the skills of experience. That should actually be in the CV, and it's not in your generic one because it wasn't suited. That's a generic CV, right? It saves you time and energy, but yeah, you are limited to how much you are actually being able to show. Then you get to the semi-tailored CV. So this is where you align your CV more to a type of job. And when I say type of job, let's say it's not very specifically to a role, but it's like groups of or themes across certain roles that you find you are quite attracted to. The pros, there's, yeah, of course, there's a very much better chance of a hiring manager seeing the match of what you to this role is, right? And cons, I can say there really are no cons. I mean, other than a bit of energy to try and manage multiple CVs. Actually, yeah, let's not go there. But this is probably, if there's one thing you take away, I would say just add some semi-tailored, semi-tailored CVs to your sort of your list of assets that you've got to work with. And how do you do this? I tried to find an example, but it's actually, again, it's a little bit tough to do this without an actual CV and an actual job to work with. But I'll try and show an example here. So let's say your generic CV, right? And let's say you're also very early in your career. You don't have a lot of experience to work with. let's say there's your generic CV. You mentioned just something like you've got R skills, you've got Excel skills, and you've done some shiny developments as well. And maybe you've done, some work on some projects, and there was this like really cool portfolio project you decided to build for yourself, built around Amazon recommendations, right? And that's part of your generic CV. But if you were looking at lots and lots of jobs, try and see, is there a pattern to the things that you feel most drawn to? And it maybe you'll see, okay, actually, there's two sorts of jobs that you're mostly interested in. You've got marketing, sort of analytics jobs, and also automation, like really excites you, right? Now, it's very hard in one CV to fit all of the stuff that you feel and can contribute to, and where you maybe don't have any experience, but you can say, still got some knowledge, or you really like to work on XYZ, like all the keywords that would make these applications much better. It's hard to fit that all in one CV in your generic one, but you can create a marketing analytics version of your CV, or an automation engineer version of your CV. And then when you get the marketing job ads, you apply with your marketing CV, and same with the automation ones. And again, that'll already be a huge improvement on what it is on all the other very generic CVs that one receives. Of course, you've got to be a little bit, I'll answer this question in more detail later if you want. But you don't want to end up managing 50 different, of these versions of CVs. I think that can get quite tiring, but probably 2 to 3, I think, would be the maximum. There's also another way you can customize CVs a little bit, right? So depending on where you're applying. So for example, I was, for my current job, just before it, I was living in South Africa at the time, but I was looking for jobs both in the UK and in Europe. So with my CVs, I had versions where I really changed all the currencies on everything, right? So I had the South African Rands version, I had the British Pounds version, and I had the Euro version. Not Eurovision, the Euro version. Because again, what's the job of this CV? It's trying to take a lot of the work of the hiring manager and reduce that as much as possible. So if having the value of the projects I was working on matters, and I'm applying to someone in the UK, doing it in South African Rands is going to completely lose the effect I want it to, because I can't assume that person understands how much South African Rands are. So I just do the conversion for them, right? I'll just put it in the value in Great British Pounds. And then, so I'm doing that work, because I won't expect that hiring manager to go and have to do all the conversions themselves. It'll totally lose its effect. So if you are doing that, I don't know, many of you are probably looking in different countries as well. Consider that can make a great thing. Like, for example, I've seen a few CVs from Kenya, right? If something's in Kenyan shillings, I've got really no idea. Maybe I should get a better idea, but I've got no idea what that is, right? So if there's a Bolivian currency or whatever, it's very hard for me to understand it, if that's a big number or a small number. Then you get to the highly tailored CV. So this is where it's highly customized to the role. The pro, of course, is that's where you can have the best chance of getting a match, or showing that you are a match to the role. Or let's say showing even more specifically how it is that you're a match, right? You might not be 100% match, but your job, the job of the CV, isn't to show 100% match where there is none, right? That would be deceitful, I suppose, even if you can put it that strongly. If you're not 100% match, you don't show that you're 100% match, but you can show where you are a match and where your other skills will help you in the areas where you aren't a match. The con here, though, is it's extremely energy intensive and time intensive to do this. At least for me, I found it can really take a lot, because you're reading very closely on the job ad, maybe researching a bit about the team that's doing the work, other publications have done, you're looking at the website, that type of thing. It can be quite time consuming. And I'm going to show you in a moment an example of how I did this myself. And the same, and I think it's worth touching also on cover letters. So not all job applications have these. On the hiring side, I find these extremely useful. Many people don't like them, and I can understand. They don't like writing them because it feels like you are, yeah, it just feels like you're trying to say a lot of stuff when all you really want to say is, hey, I just need a job. I don't want to try and make a big song and dance about how great the company is and all that. But I think this is probably the best way to add any nuance or show experience that just doesn't fit on a CV or in the usual CV format. But I found some, in reading them, there are definitely good and bad cover letters or motivations. And here you really, I can say this doesn't have anything to do really with the formatting or how it looks or where's the header and all that. Because most of the ones I've seen were just where it's a plain text entry in the application process. So there was zero formatting. It all relied 100% on what the words were. And if it's just a few sentences, it's too short. Like there's not enough to get over what it is that you want. If it's too long, and I'm talking like a page length, right? It's just a wall of text that's very hard for the hiring manager to be able to first scan, right? And this is at least what I do. I first I scan it and I see if any of the keywords jump out, and then I go back and read word for word. When you see a huge wall of text, the readers feel like, wow, this is going to take quite a lot of energy for me to hang on to every sentence as we go. But just about right. I said here 400 to 600 words, maybe a little bit less, maybe 300 to 500 words. Seems to be quite a sweet spot, I think. If you're going more than that, it's you may be saying too much. You've lost the point. If you've got too little, you've also not you've shortchanged yourself. But what's really good is in the second or third sentence to hit all the keywords where it is relevant to you. So, for example, let's say there's a job ad, you pick out that it's looking for R skills, for SQL, some sort of domain expertise. And they mentioned something about data quality being like a really key requirement for them, right? So maybe your first sentence might just still be the very generic, hello, I'm excited to apply, XYZ, that's fine, right? But then the very next one should be just bringing to, as you might say, right to someone, if you only had a few seconds to get their interest, then I'd be saying something like, oh, I've been using R for these purposes in this domain and for 2 years or something. I've got some basic knowledge of SQL through this course. I enjoy the process of spotting data quality issues as I did in my previous role. Like just this would then jump out like, okay, wow, this is mentioning all these things. At the very least, even if you don't have that experience, if you just acknowledge the requirements, it says, okay, I've read the job ad. You'll be very surprised at how many of these applications come across that there's been zero reading of the job ad. Many people, it feels like they've applied to the wrong job. Like you really think, wow, I think you pressed apply on the wrong site or something. It's like completely doesn't reflect anything we've said. So this is also where in the cover letter, it can work quite well from an energy perspective. Let's say if you use more of one of your semi-tailored CVs, but then make a very custom motivation letter, that'll get you very, very far. All right, so we touched a little bit on the cover letter. Seeing I'm still doing okay for time. So I want to show you a little bit of examples of how I've worked. So a few years ago, I was looking at moving to the Netherlands, where I am now, or the UK was also an option. But my experience up until that point was, I'd say, very an even mix between data related work and sustainability work. That's kind of my whole background. And I could equally apply for very data specific roles or for very sustainability specific roles. So data roles would be things like a data analyst or some kind of data manager, or in this case it was a data specialist, or sustainability manager, or a director of environment, or I don't know, you know, what, I can't even remember the roles now, like they're getting a bit fuzzy. But it wouldn't make sense for me to apply for sustainability role that mentioned too much about data. It was very like not relevant to many of those roles really at all. But there's a lot of, and likewise in the data focused stuff, there's much, you know, all my knowledge about CO2 emissions and different certification schemes really doesn't mean much in a data role, right? So I had my generic one where if I wasn't too sure what the role wanted, it kind of mentioned a little bit of both, but not very strongly on either. And then I had my two customized ones. And of course, within each of these, I also then made the currency conversions. And then I have had a role specific. Now, of course, role specific just depends on how much energy you can apply to each of these. But I find generally I would use then the semi-tailored quite a lot. They do a lot of heavy lifting, let's say. So here's an example. This is actually from the job that I've got now, right? So this was, I've just extracted a piece of it. So they said, as a data specialist, you'll use da, 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 da. I'm not going to go through everything, right? But what I've added here afterwards is I've picked out all the things that I do have some knowledge about, or I feel I have some feeling over, or some experience with, or a way that I know I would approach it. Even if I have, like, say, zero experience, but I've got a bit of knowledge, or I know how I would approach it. These are all the things that jump out at me. And you can see in this latter bits, none of this jumped out at me because I don't know anything about this methodology that they're talking about. I've never worked with smallholder farmers before. And I don't, you know, quantitative analyses. I mean, maybe I could have put something there, but I wasn't really sure even what that meant, right? So I picked these things up. Then in the cover letter, and this isn't even actually that great a cover letter, looking at it again, now some years later, but you'll see still why it was very impactful. So I'm using, even if you could either use the exact words, but it's all the same theme. So they talk about value chains. I'm like, I don't know anything about agriculture, but I did at that point know about value chains. So I added in what I knew about value chains and working with informal operators, which I then assumed was very similar to smallholder farmers, for example. I had also read, like, they use the terminology of agribusiness on their site. So I just used their language, right? So I said, I don't have formal experience in agribusiness. And then I just did mitigate, right? But I'm fully capable of understanding the drivers, etc. And where my evidence was just that I have done so many other sectors. So that's enough. I felt to just pique their interest at talking to me further to find out, okay, well, give us more examples of that. And then I talked a lot about data, but a little bit more of the underlying things that I think, now, someone else could just talk about how they like data and they think data is cool or whatever, but I want to show what value I can bring, that I understand a bit about, you know, you need to understand how the data is collected, how it's perceived, what assumptions there are, how you communicate those results. So I'm looking at sort of what they're saying, and either using their language directly or using it in my words, but still showing them that I do know something that maybe they either do know or don't know. And I also added, like, I know at that stage as well, there was just the issue of ethics and data sharing was really getting a lot of mainstream attraction. I had a feeling maybe they did think about this, maybe not at the time, but they talked about an public online portal. So I thought, okay, let me mention that ethical considerations are really important to keep in mind, right? So that again would just, like, if I'm looking on the hiring side, is really like, wow, we didn't mention ethical considerations, but there's a link here, right? A very strong link between these two. And maybe that is something we should be thinking about. Wow, maybe this guy really can help us. And then this was also a non-profit. So I just spoke about my time working at an NGO, because I know from that experience that working in an NGO is different from working in the private sector. So that tells you a little bit about the cover letter. So let's go then into the CV. So again, I was picking out bits that they have used and then using it again in different language, right? So talk about, this is just my highlighting again the work in the non-profit. Also another let me take a step back for a second. you don't have to feel like you are repeating yourself, because your CV and cover letter do not always exactly go along together in every step of the process. Maybe it does, but it can very often happen just in, they are two separate documents. Someone forgets to add a cover letter to an email forward, or it doesn't get uploaded properly, or whatever the case may be, right? You don't know what's going to happen. So don't feel that you can't repeat yourself in at least some of the themes. I think that's totally fine. So again, I just, I use the word data, what I did with data, enhancing data, regular reporting and communicating, because for example, if they're saying here, for example, to proactively distill trends and insights from the database, right? Then I think, okay, well, what would follow from that? Probably communicating. And I have had some experience in communicating to non-technical stakeholders. So I thought, okay, see, public portal, decisions, effective, like they didn't ask here for good communication, but I know I have it and I know that's relevant to this work. So I added it in. And as an example, like I also had previous experience, a lot of experience as a sustainability engineer, but none of that sustainability work is relevant really to this role, not directly. I mean, I had a lot of experience in these other roles doing that. So that's what I increased. If this had been for a sustainability related role, you'd probably see a switch in these. I would cut out most of this data work, make this just much more about the sustainability related aspects. And the sustainability engineer section would be way more beefed up. So I will take a break. Let's see. Oh, yeah, I knew I might go a little. I think we're still doing okay because we started at about 10 past, I think. But I will try to speed it up a little bit. Okay, so there's the other thing we should talk about is once you apply, right? Or either before you apply or during your application, you might think, wow, compared to me, like I really know nothing. I see all these other people with tons of qualifications, lots of experience, certifications, like as long as they are. And, I'm just me, and I know, there's some things I know, there's a lot I don't know. You really could be thinking about that. Like I'm not as qualified as other candidates. But qualification is very not subjective, it's relevant. I mean, it's relative to the role. And I'll show you some examples of how this looks. So part of this thing of not having qualifications is you think, okay, well, I have no experience, like, but the thing is, well, let's say the good news is the good CV or a good application is not about, a good CV doesn't correlate with who has the most CV, right? I see a lot of let's say anxiety around, I don't have all the certifications and everything. I mean, that can help, right? Definitely, but that doesn't need to stop you from applying for roles that you will do well in. So it's not about having the most skills, the most experience, certifications, and so on. It's about how are your skills specifically suited to this role, your experience specifically suited, and specific and relevant in the context of what that job requires. That is what makes a good CV, in my view. And here's some examples. Let's say that one of the requirements that they say is sharing results with internal stakeholders. Now, one person can say that, they use Git, they're Azure certified, they're a Python core developer, they're on Forbes 30 under 30 list. But that tells me nothing. I have to make a lot of assumptions there, but that tells me nothing about if you're suited to our role or not, because I'm not really understanding what it is that you have done. But let's say someone with way less qualifications says, oh yeah, I've worked in R Markdown, right? I did this really cool thing where I managed to incorporate track changes from Word into my R Markdown documents. And that really helped me take feedback from stakeholders. I developed an internal wiki of some of the things that we were working on. I've incorporated feedback into the design in XYZ way. I often briefed non-technical managers on the limitations of the analysis that I'm submitted to them for their meetings. And also, yeah, I improved our data gathering process. So by doing all this reporting, it could be improved if we change form entries in some way. Like this could be like now it depends on the hiring side, right? But you don't know yet exactly, especially if the job ad itself is quite poor or the job role that was poorly defined in the beginning. You don't know what the hiring manager is actually really looking for. But if you don't have to worry about this person here, right? You just put how you would do it, how you match, and then let the hiring manager make that match afterwards, right? So then I can say, okay, well, it would have been quite cool if you know were Azure certified and you knew a lot of Python, but actually, we know that this role is going to have a lot of talking to non-technical people and actually looking at all the applications. None of them mentioned that, but this one did mention it. This is actually, yeah, this is, we've realized this is, we mentioned this just a little bit. We should have actually made it much more strong, but this person's just risen above, right? Everyone else that they seem to understand how they would go about this work. Another one. So let's say you work closely with IT and engineering. Again, someone's just lists all this type of stuff. That's great, but it still doesn't tell me really very much. I mean, maybe there's a few things that I don't know if I could pick out, but you see, like already I'm trying to pick out here, and that's, you don't want someone spending time trying to do this. Maybe you say, oh, I've got a bit of SQL experience, right? So I've generated a few views, I've updated data dictionaries, I've created an onboarding guide. And especially for more junior roles, right? I understand a lot of you might be still very early in your careers. It's not expected that you are that you've got all of this knowledge and experience. And sometimes it's also like, even if I see such a huge list, I mean, you can't have very deep knowledge of any of these things anyway, right? It's good to know that you've done them, that's great. But if you don't mention that you do actually have SQL experience, that you did create an onboarding guide, maybe this is not things we are specifically going to do, but I will make that translation and I'll say, okay, so you do have this work here that is actually relevant to something else we were thinking of doing anyway. And then again, this might be how it is that you separate yourself, even though you don't have, a lot of experience. You might have the right experience. So I'll leave you with, well, I think there's still a few more slides, but there's no absolutely perfect candidates, right? But there are really good candidates who have certain shortcomings, if you want to, that's maybe not even the right word, but there's certain shortcomings, but we can always work with the shortcomings if we know what they are and if we know where your strengths are, and maybe we adjust the role a little bit, maybe something that we thought someone else would hand over to this person, we say, okay, well, they won't be able to hand over that work, but they can take other work, and we'll make plans to mitigate, this sort of change in or adjustment in scope that we're doing, because we actually really like what this person can bring to the team. Quick word on managing your energy, right? Because it can seem like really overwhelming. You've got to like manage, all these, apply for jobs. And as I've shown you, at least for me, I find applying for work extremely energy and emotionally sapping, right? So you've got to work smartly. So I would say a sort of rule of thumb is you've got your generic CV. Maybe you've got 2 of these more specific CVs. The specific CVs are what, let's say semi-tailored. Maybe I should say semi-specific or semi-tailored. CVs are going to do most of your work for you. And then you've got a handful of those where you really felt like, wow, this is a very good match. It's worth the time and energy for you to really put in the work and the energy. And this is kind of this green bar sort of indicates the amount of effort that I would put in, right? Or that I advise you put in. Like if the job ad itself is very generic and you feel there's maybe not a low match, but you need work or whatever, put it in. Other hiring managers will probably curse me, like, don't just apply for anything. But of course, you never know who else is going to apply, right? Maybe your generic is still okay. Don't put too much energy in there. But I try and match in a way, like match the efforts to how good of a match you are for that role. If it's low. This is where, if you feel you're a pretty good match, especially if it's a job that you really want, use one of the semi-tailored CVs. That's, there's a medium energy in sort of keeping all these semi-tailored CVs up to date, but it could be quite a useful thing for you to do. And I think most people, if you just go from this generic to this semi-tailored step, you're already going to find much better results. Then, of course, there's those that where you are a perfect match and you just feel like, yeah, this is, I really either want or need this job, and you've got the time and energy for it, and do it. But I would say use this sparingly. All right, only from your own energy perspective. If you've got a ton of energy, I know some people are just very high energy individuals, by all means, go ahead, make every single one a perfect match if you can. So main takeaways here is be very specific. You are employable, but you need to highlight in very specific ways how it is that you are, in what ways you are a match for the role. And it takes energy to be specific. So try and work smartly. All right, next time you're writing a CV, just think, be specific, be specific. Okay, that brings me to the end, but before I get to the questions, and I've got a question slide that collects some of these, I do have a bit of a goodie bag for everyone here. Let me take you through it. Some additional resources for you. If you want to see that resume example that I showed earlier, that's, I think great, just as if you want to use the formatting in that as well, that's fantastic. We'll change it up a little bit. But that's a great one. I was really surprised that the first Google search showed what I thought was actually quite a good one. You might be asking, is there anything I can do to stand out to employers? It's a blog post I wrote, which is the core, actually really forms many of the core ideas that I've just presented here. Then also, the one I had a lot of fun in writing this blog post was hiring a data analyst. So this was, I think, about a year and a half or a year ago, maybe a bit more, that I was hiring for a data analyst. And while I was looking through about 100 CVs, I was just taking free form notes as they were coming to me about the CVs I was seeing. Of course, it's totally anonymous. You don't know anything about who was applying, but it was just my thoughts as a hiring manager. So it's maybe a good insight for you of how at least one person was thinking and feeling as they were having a look at all these applications. Also, what was just a bit of a fun one is there's you won't find this if you go click to my, if you go on my site. But if you about, I think, 10 or 12, I was looking at job ads and then just trying to interpret what it is that they're really looking for, whether I think it's a good ad, or I think for one or two of them also I just saw some red flags in that. So maybe you can go have a look at that, and might be fun just to see. One of the best resources I've come across for having a career in, let's say, the broad tent of data science is this book, Build a Career in Data Science, by Emily Robertson and Jacqueline Nolis. If you go to, it's a paid resource, but I think worth every penny. If you go to their custom link of bestbook.cool, it will redirect you to the Manning site with a discount. I can't remember. I've seen it vary sort of between 20 and 40%. They do also have a free podcast, which is excellent. It's like you're sitting at the canteen lunch table and you're hearing two senior data scientists talking about stuff in a really easy to follow way. I really love listening to them. It's a great podcast and it's free. So what else can you ask for? Then also, if you may be interested in the book that I wrote, Project Management Fundamentals, it's quite a short read. If I had more time and energy, I would have made it even shorter. I think it's about 15 years of project management experience that I think I'm at least okay at, and it's sort of the advice that I give to people. If I see they're struggling a little bit with projects, it's all condensed. If you can afford $12, you can use the main site. If you're within Kenya or another, I think LMIC is low to middle income country, you're welcome to use, there's a discounted version for $5. And there's, for the Our Ladies group today, 20 free copies at that link. So when they are finished, they are finished. But you'll get this link just now. All right, so we can then hand over to questions. I'll put some up here, but I will open the floor. Thank you very much. I'll maybe, I haven't looked at the chat yet, so I can also have a bit of a look there. But if you've got a question you want to ask so much, maybe Shal, if you can, or someone can help moderate a little bit.
Thank you so much. Please confirm if I'm still audible.
You are, yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Oscar. It's good to know that we are all employable. We just need to create and present awesome CVs. To the audience, please feel free to post questions in the chat so that Oscar can tackle them. So we had a few questions, but then we've integrated some into like we've bucketed some of them. So our first question is a 3-in-1, and it talks about having our social media profiles public. So is there an added advantage in having our CVs in public, like on your website or GitHub profile? Do recruiters really look at applicant social media profiles as well as their GitHub profiles? And do you think publicizing projects that one has done holds more water than just sharing their CVs? There are people who have done amazing work out here, but they're not able to express themselves well on their CVs. Sorry, that's a 3-in-1 question. Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, but I understand you. So it's hard to talk in general, like about what others do. But yeah, my experience is, I wouldn't put social media profiles on your CV unless what you talk and tweet about is relevant. Yeah, it's a bit of an interesting one. I think even like take my account, right? I talk mostly just about R and data related stuff, and probably I wouldn't put that on there. I think it's not the best place to show what it is, because also it's I would say a little bit risky. You never know, maybe you've got a bad morning. I wouldn't use like Twitter or Facebook per se, unless, for example, I knew that the company I was applying to, that was relevant in some way, that they would be interested or would know. Like, let's say if I was applying to our studio, for example, then I would definitely say, hey, yeah, I'm already quite, because I know they work a lot on Twitter. Then I would say, yeah, but if I'm going to apply to an NGO somewhere, I probably wouldn't, like, do they know about Twitter? Why am I putting this? Too much risk, I would say. When it comes to things like GitHub, very surprisingly, at least in the jobs I've seen, almost no one puts a GitHub profile, right? Now that's actually totally fine, because I wouldn't put it if you don't have any work there, or if it's not relevant. But if you do have work that's relevant, then I'll say, yeah, go ahead. But also, again, like where I think it's perhaps a little bit risky in what people have done is they'll put a GitHub link just as like a reference at the top. But again, like you have to think, what's the person reading this? Am I creating work for them to go and dig out from my messy GitHub profile what was relevant? Like that's not going to be good, right? If you just say, here's a GitHub profile and it's a couple of like dead projects or things you haven't done, or then I'd say no. But if you've done, I guess maybe some open source work where you published something, then I'd say, yeah, you could, with the caveat that if you're going to reduce the amounts of work to the bare minimum for whoever's going to click that link. So I wouldn't just put maybe a GitHub profile, but where that project is relevant, then I would add that link, right? If you said, hey, I did this churn analysis in a similar way on this project, and then I'd link directly to that, even directly to the code or something where you think it is, right? So hopefully that element is still like coming a little bit more to the fore when you do such things. Just think, wow, am I making this person work, and what are they going to find, right? So it's less about having GitHub or not. It's more, put it this way, an empty or messy GitHub profile I'd rather not add. It's going to, if I click on it and I think, okay, how's this relevant? It's going to penalize you even a little bit, I would say. So rather have nothing than a poor show. Working in public, and that I'm trying to remember a little bit your question, but I'd say that's also a bit tricky, man, because you're sort of hoping that someone sees the work and then says, hey, this is really great work. We're doing something similar. Can we hire you or something? I don't know. I think that would be a very small chance of that happening, unless, you're in a market where that kind of thing happens a lot. I don't think that would happen. But where I do see the benefits of sharing it is what you are learning from the process of writing. Like I know anyone who's ever published anything publicly, it's very different to actually doing it than thinking about doing it, right? So making work public, trying to see, what response that gets, even if it's none. I think that's more the benefit as, let's say, a way of having experience to have something to talk about in your CV, rather than hoping that that work is exactly what's going to get you noticed. It's more the experience that you gain that you can add to your repertoire, I'd say. That's where the benefit comes in.
Okay, thank you for that. Another one. You've talked a bit about this, but from your experience, do you think applying for jobs that we do not 100% qualify for kind of irritates the hiring managers, or should we just go for it? And in addition, do you think it is wise to highlight in your cover letter that you have inadequate skills in XYZ, but you are always ready to learn? Does honesty really help?
So I would say on the first point, you are unlikely to match any job 100%. So definitely apply for them. Also remember, now that job ad, especially, they'll sometimes job ads go through a lot of people, right? And everyone's added all there what they think is important. And sometimes it's really hard to get away from that. And so a job ad might add a lot of things that many of them are actually just nice to haves, right? Or they're trying to cast the net kind of wide and hoping that people will apply to have at least some of these requirements. So I'd say definitely apply if you've got some that you partially match it, right? And again, the message is you want to try and show where you do match it. That's the main thing, because hopefully in your case, what they're actually looking for is where your strengths are. I would say I wouldn't worry about like irritating the hiring manager. I mean, that's the hiring manager is not going to remember even who you are, right? If you're not a total match. It's not great for hiring managers to wade through all of these, but I would say the only reason I wouldn't, and I mean, in the end of the day, especially if you need work, right? If you need work, and I think it's always worth a shot. It's at worst, the recruiter will screen you out, or maybe one of the managers will screen out pretty quick if they say, okay, there's really no match here. But if you still just doing it sincerely, like, okay, yeah, I do think I've got something to add, then do it. But I'd say the risk is pretty low in like irritating someone. I think you don't have to worry about that. Just do your best effort and apply. Was there a third element? I can't remember now if there's a third element there.
No, I think that's it.
Okay.
There's a question I missed here, and it ties to the first question that I asked. Will recruiters consider an applicant who has no work experience but has done their own extensive pet projects, and these projects are listed on GitHub?
Oh, right. Oh, sorry. And I think I did remember, sort of in a way, I suppose, linked to this. If you do, I do want to go back to the previous bits. You asked if there's elements that you are unqualified for, is it good to say where your shortcomings are, right?
Oh.
I think you can do it in a tactful and positive way, right? You could do it very terribly and say, hey, I'm totally clueless and I don't know anything, but please hire me. That could be a message. Or you could be like, I do bring this to the table. Like if you do it a bit more positively, say, I do bring this to the table. I think it's okay. Like if the list isn't too, or don't make the list very long, but acknowledge that, you don't have a lot of experience in this, or you've got some in this, or this is an area you don't, but you're very keen. I would then also just add something about why it is you are keen, or you're keen because you want to move your career in this direction, or you're keen because it's quite fascinating in the growth of X in the global context, or whatever it may be. Like add a little bit of like, okay, you've got the shortcoming, but you're still interested, but why, or how do you think you'll learn about it, or you're keen to learn as well. Is always, I suppose, a basic catch-all that will at least work. When you talked about publishing, so your question is really around, should I have a portfolio of work to show? I think it depends where you are in your career. Of course, there'll be certain roles where just having a good portfolio of work really does matter, right? Like, yeah, again, if I was going to apply as a software developer at RStudio, an open source company, it would really help if I linked to all the other open source work I've done or something, right? But having a portfolio can help quite a lot when you are much earlier in your career, but it's definitely not a requirement. I don't think it matters that, well, firstly, on the one hand, I still have not seen many people that have a portfolio of some kind, but I think it will help you, that you've got something you can talk about, right? It's less even just about showing that you've done the work, but it's not, I don't know if there's any job in data anywhere that will require you to have a portfolio as an entry level. Most people understand entry level jobs, especially, just don't have work, but it does give you a few more things to talk about, right? And just experience to gain. So from that angle, I would say it's quite useful. But if you don't, especially, I mean, portfolio is quite a time-consuming thing to build in any case. So I would again just use it judiciously, right? About how much effort you put in making a portfolio.
Okay, thank you. There is a question that was asked by one Benjamin. Sorry, I can't.
Maybe I can try and find you. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, we've muted him.
Yeah, that's good luck.
Yeah. So the question he'd asked is, what are your, you've seen the question, right?
What are your experiences
with
jobs on the hidden market? I assume estimates say up to 70% are given to applicants without any public job ad beforehand. Cool. No, I've not certainly been a part of that. I mean, there's always been a job ad, a screening process. So I can't say. I mean, maybe in some sectors or whatever it could happen, but yeah, unfortunately, I don't have any experience with that. But it's not to say that that is necessarily a bad thing, that there's a hidden market, right? Let's say with jobs being advertised, I mean, I'd say it's probably to the detriment of the company who doesn't make a job ad public, but there could be other legitimate reasons that they just want to go directly to someone who knows someone else has worked in this before. I mean, I'm sure there's probably, I suppose, probably many. I'd say it's probably, if I think about it a little bit more likely to happen more in senior roles where you kind of need someone with very specific skills. Jobs are hired via networks, not via ads. So if I think about it a bit more, you're more likely to experience that later. But that's also where things like having good networks and that sort of come into play. But I can't say that it's maybe very relevant for junior or entry or early career roles.
Okay, thank you for that, Oscar. Two more questions that I think we can bundle into one. The first one is, if you qualify for a job, but the software you use is different than what they want, but the same software will produce similar or better results, how do you sell yourself? The other one is, any insights on preparing for job interviews when the job ad does not mention which software you use?
Yeah. So on this, okay, so let's say on the software, if they're using different software, right? Maybe they use Python and you use R and you don't use that, should you apply? I think definitely apply. You can still highlight what it is you've got. Although I would maybe have this question in your mind. Are you willing to learn Python, right? If they say they use Python, are you willing to learn Python? If the answer is no, then I'd say, well, probably, I don't know. It depends how desperate you are for the work. But I would say still on the balance of risks, just apply, right? You can say you've got R experience. If you are willing to learn, then say you are willing to learn Python. A lot of tools have so many transferable skills. And also, if you think of any sort of tech stack, right, of what's happening in the whole lineage of data, and with so many different options available, it's very unlikely that you find someone that meets all that exact same tech stack In many cases, people bring very useful and knowledgeable, good knowledge from using other things into this job. Other times they will say, oh, actually, we don't really mind. We just know we need to, a lot of the team uses Python, but actually the work that you're doing doesn't really matter. You can use R, that's fine. So I would say definitely use it, but present it as what it is you are still bringing, right? And how your experience relates, and how you think, if maybe they mention some very specific, let's say libraries and packages, even within that, then I would do a little bit of research and say, okay, is there something similar? And then you can say, okay, maybe you've used some similar libraries, but maybe not the main language. So I'd still definitely apply. Then you also asked about, what if they don't list it? Well, if they don't list it, just say what it is that you do bring. So don't list the software. It could very well be that they actually don't really mind what you use, or for them, it's really then more the end results that they are concerned about, right? So I suspect many places, especially in smaller organizations, or those that I consider very tech-like the one that I'm in, right? If you're working in a fintech or some highly venture capital startup or a bank or something, maybe they've got very specific requirements. But very many organizations are way down their data maturity, and I suspect don't actually really matter what it is you bring. Maybe as another example, like we've been looking for someone specifically with Power BI experience, but it doesn't mean that people that didn't have Power BI experience were screened out of the process. If they had any other visualization tool, that's fine, because we know we are willing to support a person transition to Power BI, right? So but if they didn't have any visualization tools experience at all, like had never used any of these BI tools, or even like making visualizations in R or something else, that would have been quite a challenge to say, okay, well, how much training are they going to need? But then again, it helps if you show how it is, or that you are, if you say you're a quick learner, for example, it's good to then also show some evidence of that. A great evidence usually is, oh, but I've used all these other tools. So it's like, okay, you pick up tools. But if someone says, oh, they don't have Power BI, but they also on their CV don't have any other software that they've used or skills, it's hard to see the evidence of how have you learned to use tools, right?
Or advance their skills in R, to check out the big book of R by Oscar. If you can see it on my screen, it's such an amazing book. Like, it has so many resources that every time when I get DMs and people ask me, oh, Shalmin, I want to learn, like, it's always, I just pass this book. I'm like, here you go. And we want this book to help a lot of people, not only in Kenya, but all over the world. I had posted a link on chat. So yeah, I'm going to post it again. If you know someone who really wants to learn, just share this with them. So anyway, over to you, Njoki.
Okay, thank you, Shell. And I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Oscar, so much for your time and for taking us through this wonderful talk. It was such an insightful talk. I'd say I would spot some of the mistakes I've done in the past through the talk. So thank you. And so we have come to the end of this talk. But as Maggie had mentioned, this was our very first talk of this year. So we expect to have tutorials, talks, lightning talks. Yes, so expect more from the chapter as the year unfolds. And also, if you are interested in talking and training us, please do reach out. We have our email address here. You can also reach out through LinkedIn, Twitter, or Meetup. We'll always respond to those messages. And I wish you a very good day, morning, whatever point of the day that it is where you are. I wish you a good one, and we will see you in a few months. Sorry, in a month or so. And lastly, the recording will be made available to our YouTube channel. So the link will be shared. I'll share the link after after editing and putting everything together. Cheryl, if you can mute, that'd be good. I think there's echo from my end. Yeah, thank you. But other than that, thank you so much for attending, and thank you so much, Oscar, for this wonderful talk. We have surely learned a lot. Yeah. Okay. Please feel free to leave, and we will see you soon. Bye.